Throughout most of the history of science, science was not called science. It was called natural philosophy. And the philosopher that won the battle of the Greek philosophers that sort of fashioned the way that we would perceive the world was Aristotle. And so when we speak of the Middle Ages, we speak of Aristotle's universe. That's how they saw the world. And so let me run through some of the basics. Aristotle had taken the two realms of his mentor Plato, the realm of ideas or form and the realm of matter, and he had combined them. He said that form adheres in matter, and that matter was base and it would want to sink to the very center of the universe, whereas form was light and it would want to rise to the outer edges of the universe. And so whenever things were combinations of that, some would sink and some would rise. And so he took the four terrestrial elements of the pre-Socratic philosophers, earth, air, fire, and water, and he applied different mixtures of form and matter. The element that had the most matter and the least form was earth. Therefore, it would sink to the center of the universe. And then above that would be water, which would have more form and less matter. And above that, air, which had even more form. And then lastly, fire. And so they would try to find their natural place, so sometimes called the doctrine of natural place. These objects would move, space itself would move them to where they're supposed to be. Therefore, Earth would be in the center of the universe, then above that would be the water of the oceans, and above that would be the air of the atmosphere. And Aristotle believed that fire would leap even further into this ring of fire that surrounded the Earth. And so whenever a piece of wood burned, Aristotle would use that as an illustration that the wood was made up of a mixture of the different elements. And so as the wood burned, you would see the moisture coming out, and then you would see the earth as ash fall to the bottom of the fire pit, and then you would see the fire rising and leaping higher as it tried to reach the ring of fire around the earth. And so each of these elements would lead to its own natural place. The belief was that beyond the terrestrial elements, beyond this ring of fire, there was another element, the fifth element, the quintessential element called ether. And ether was almost pure form that made up the planets, and the sun and the moon and the stars were made out of ether. And Aristotle taught that these elements of ether, the sun, the moon, and the stars, the planets, were embedded in these large crystalline spheres. And as one sphere would move, it would move the others like cogs in a machine. And what got it all started was the very outermost sphere called the prime mobile. And the deity would turn the prime mobile, and as it turned, it would turn the inner crystalline spheres. And so you would see the planets and the stars and the moon and the sun moving around the earth. Beyond the prime mobile was the habitat of God, the habitum Dei. And so we have this conception at that time that the most base elements would be in the very center of the universe, and the purest, the most ethereal, as some might say, would be at the very outer edges of the universe. And throughout the Middle Ages, as that concept of Aristotelian universe began to blend with Christian theology, we developed the concept of hell being in the center of the earth, in the septic tank, in the very most base part of space, whereas the heavenly realm would be out at the outer edges of the universe.